Okay, I think we are live on YouTube. Okay.
Thank
Well, this is
you.
very exciting. And then I have a special guest today is Isabelle Engler, the author, the music therapist, and also a pianist. And she can do a lot of instruments as well. You probably have seen her. It was Isabelle Engler. All right, so this is very fun, and I want to make sure we don't have any echoes, anything. Yeah, how do we sound? Let's see. Good. All right. Okay. So it's so wonderful to have Isabel here with us. Like I said, that she is an author, children's book author, and also a pianist. And more importantly, she's a board certified music therapist, and she worked with children. And then guess what? Not just only in schools or in different, sometimes you do presentations in libraries, bookstores, and more important, her main work, sometimes she works with little babies in ICU
Mhm.
and then also children, they are in the hospitals and they need special care. And also with adults, actually, they need help with the music therapy. And then, what a wonderful opportunity have you here with us, Isabel.
Thank you so much, Amanda. It's my honor to be here.
Thank you. And then today we're going to touch on your books and the important work you do, because a lot of people probably know you're authors. We know authors, and we can tell all your books behind you. And then those are really beautiful books and with culture contents. And I think that is something we want to explore more about it. And then maybe when we start, maybe why don't you tell us what is a music therapist? And you are certified and you work with a lot of people. You actually also have played a performing pianist. Actually, you
Yes.
performed in Asia, in Europe, from the States, Japan, Italy, France. And so we would like to hear a little bit more about your experience. Would you like to share a little bit and touch on that with
Sure,
us?
sure. Oh, thank you so much for touching on so many aspects of my previous experiences too. But long story short, I grew up studying piano and Taiwan in the US, growing up, right? It's all classical music. It's very much like a performance studies, right? And so, and I never knew about music therapy. So, from age of 4 until through college, after college went to study with a chair of piano at San Francisco Conservatory of Music. I never heard about music therapy, but for me there's always part of me, I mean, I found music to be a special way to help me process emotions and help me to just generally feel better when I'm going through a hard time. And I was, kind of going with the flow of, what's expected of a performance student, right? We would participate in festivals, so we had juries, we had recitals, we collaborate with other classical musicians. But it wasn't until 10 years out of school, actually,
Mm.
and I heard from a former classmate who is an accomplished violin player, and she told me she was going back to school for music therapy. And I thought, what is music therapy? Do you play for people? Do you like, what do you even do? And so she shared about how she was very intrigued by it and wanted to use music to help people with eating disorders. And I thought, my mind just was blown. I was like, huh? You can help, with mental health. That's how, it has so many question marks. So at the time, I looked it up online and I tried to like get some books that she recommended to read about, like, is this a real thing? And I was just fascinated by, oh, there's science behind it, there's research behind it, it is a field, and there's board certification for it. And I was just like, this feels like something I wanted to do. Like, I wanted to be able to use music to help others. But at the time, I had a 1 year old and I was pregnant with my second child. So, in my mind, I was like, there's no way I was going to go back to school for another degree. But, this idea kept on coming back to me because I would see her doing practicum and like experiences. And then also I start hearing more, right? Like, 'cause I start paying attention to this terminology. And so it just kind of jumps at me, in the back of my mind sometimes. And then another year goes by or two, and that friend finished her school and she was board certified and she was working at a psych hospital. And she was still maintaining her very successful private violin studio. She was still performing, but then she has this additional skill set that she was using, right? And I was like, man, that's just still really cool. And so my younger one, I had a baby, like a second baby, but I just couldn't shake that idea off of my head. So I discussed with my husband, and I really just felt like this calling, like tugging me, like I think this, that angelic moment of like, I think this is what you can do to contribute to help others. And I'm very grateful that my husband was fully supportive, and he just said, if this is what God is calling you to do, go for it. And so I like auditioned and submitted my application to the school, and I was like, all right, let's see where this takes me. But it turned out just to be like, I think if you ever felt like you were called to do something, and like everything just like was what I could ever imagine and more. Just this journey has been so wonderful for me, but also just exploring how much music can do for people when used intentionally.
Totally. Well, quite a journey, right? And then you got called. Oh, I think originally you were curious about it,
Yes.
right? And then, but the funny thing is that the curiosity is so strong, and then you decide to go in, and then now you are a part of it. And that's
Yes.
the very amazing thing. And when you talk about, oh, the music can help people, I think eating disorder, wow. So, but at the same time, I think what is really intriguing is that we all listen to music.
Yes.
And well, I would say most of people do. And then especially talking about children, when they were born or when they were little, I think a lot of parents would, play music or sing songs with them. And when they go to preschool, well, you have been to the preschool, you know how they sing. They sing with their hearts and with their bodies and with their minds, and they just all in. And that is something and then you say, well, there's research behind it. I think that's
Yes.
even more important. It's not just we are saying it. I remember I talked with an ophthalmologist. He is a surgeon, and then he said, um, here is a CD. Well, at the time is a CD. Now it's a streaming album. He said, well, take this CD. This is something I give to my patients. And this is actually something I played when I was in the operation room for another
Yes.
surgeon, because they
Yes.
were doing an experiment to see when there is music and the live music playing when operation is going on. Well, that helped the patient feel calmer and
Yes.
feel better, and it did. So
Yes.
that
Yes.
it totally is what you said. So do you have any stories, because you work with the little babies, I think
Yes.
newborns in the hospitals? How does it help them? How does that help them, the music? Yeah.
For sure. And I have a very relevant example to echo to what you just shared.
Hmm.
So I'm certified to work in the neonatal intensive care unit, which is also known as NICU, right? And
Hmm.
so usually babies are in this unit because they were born prematurely. Or maybe they're not necessarily premature, but there's some complication, medical complications in their body that needs, advanced technology to support their lives. And so these are very vulnerable population, right? They're usually infants, and if not, they're like 28 weeks gestational age. So that's full term is 40. I know but just in case our audience
Yes,
doesn't know.
yes.
And so for me, working in this population, one of many things that I've done there is actually doing procedural support. And so NICU babies have to go through a lot of procedures. A lot of times they have surgeries to maybe fix hernia, or maybe their vision, their lungs, and these are common. But one of the most, I would say, intense procedure is actually one of the vision checks. And long story short, it's called ROP eye exam. And these exams have to be done to check that vision is developed correctly or as
Mm.
expected, so that if not, early intervention and treatment can be done so these babies don't grow up blind. And so it's very essential. But the way it's done, that these baby, imagine, right, babies sleep a lot and they're woken up, all of a sudden doctor comes in, the ophthalmologist, and they shine a bright light because they really have to see it clearly. And so the
Totally.
baby's eyelids are kind of opened up and clipped with medical clips, and then the ophthalmologist would use the medical tool to kind of just look to the back of the eyeballs, up and down, left and right. I'm standing a foot away. I can see the back of the baby's eyeballs, right? And imagine this baby being held down by other staff, and bright light shining, something is, jamming into the eyeballs. Of course, they're not harmed, but emotionally, it can be very stressful.
Yeah.
They're screaming on top of their lungs, and these babies are usually, they have lots of monitors, right?
Hmm.
Because they have other medical conditions going on. So their monitors are beeping, going off, heart rate is going up, oxygen. Sometimes they stop breathing because they're so stressed and traumatized
Mm.
by this moment. So their oxygen is dropping. So monitors beeping, beeping, going off. And then, sometimes it's a shared room. So baby next to it hears it and then they get stressed and then they start crying and then the monitors start going off. So it's kind of like a ripple effect, right? And so long story short, I'm kind of trying to paint the picture of the
Yes.
stress. That stress can also affect the staff, not just the baby, right? Maybe
Mhm.
the caregiver, the mom is next to it and they're just completely like shocked, they can't even watch it. And then the doctor, even though they're professional and they expect it, but it
Yes.
doesn't mean that it's not stressful for them.
Mhm.
And so I start accompanying the doctor and the nurses that are helping out and do live music during this procedure. Even though it's short, it's not a long operation, but we do see the baby sort of like they're tuning their brain, they're tuning to the music,
Mhm.
and they are able to redirect their stress and perception of pain to the music. And I usually try to like discuss with the caregivers beforehand, like, hey, do you have a preferred lullaby? Is there something that's special in your family, or what's your preferred language? So I can connect with the baby a little bit more. And maybe it's a baby that I have worked with before,
Mhm.
then I know their responses to music too. But I'm able to kind of like bring live music and I can modulate like the tempo, like speed up a little bit or slow it down when they're really, really stressed out. So the environment feels a lot calmer and more contained. And if like afterward when the physician's leaving, then I can sort of like get a little bit closer to the baby and make that eye contact. And then the baby can sort of like catch a breath and really just like okay, like recompose themselves too.
Mm.
It is really powerful because like we've received feedback from doctors that like they're less stressed during this procedure, but we've seen that the babies like even when they're stressed, but their heart rate comes down a lot quicker, their oxygen goes back up. So then the nurses who are supporting these babies are also less stressed because they see the baby sort of like become like be calmer and then also come back to their homeostasis, I guess is the term, but basically normal
Mhm.
expected state.
Right. So is the music being played in the background or is it live music? How 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 do you combine or embed the music in this kind of situation?
It's live. I would sing and I have a little acoustic guitar with me.
Yeah.
So because it's live music, there's flexibility, right? Like if I need
Right.
to move a little faster or slow
Mm.
down, or maybe I just hum, like
Yeah.
if maybe it's too much noise going on, like we don't
Yeah.
need to sing lyrics, then I hum, or I don't sing at all, I just finger pick
Yes.
the guitar string. So there's flexibility in modifying the music when it's
Hmm.
live.
Hmm. Is it beautiful? This reminds me another story. I think this is just amazing to see. That's exactly the research the ophthalmologist I know did. And he said we did because they were observing the heart rate and also the stress
Yes.
level. And he was saying, you wouldn't believe when I played the piano within minutes, and the patient was much calmer, the heart rate came down, and then you can tell they were like in the zoom or in the flow with operation, but more focused with the music instead of the real operation is going on. Is that there will always be discomfort, but
Yes.
definitely kind of distract and also giving a kind of a different way to let them cope with the situation they have to
Yes.
go through.
Yes.
And especially when you talk about babies, the newborns, they have to do that. And then when you talk about it's like ripple effect, the one baby, then the other baby, and then also the caregivers and the nurses and the doctors. I think it's like they can all benefit from the live music.
Yes. Yes.
And that's really interesting. So actually years ago when I was doing baby and toddler program, and one grandmother came to me because the baby was about 7 months old, and
Hmm.
I teach kids with music also, and
Hmm.
then the streaming album. And she said, when my granddaughter doesn't want to sleep and just keep crying 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, I will just play you music and she will fall
Oh,
asleep.
that's awesome.
So I think the idea there's some kind of power in music or
Yes.
the soothing sound, like when you said, this is what you do the music live. You sometimes you hum, sometimes you sing. And I love when you mentioned when you said it's live because you can adjust the tempo
Yes.
to slow down or depends what they need. So
Right. The
that,
rhythms. Yes.
right? Yeah, so I
Hmm.
thought that was really beautiful. That actually leads to your books you've
Thanks.
been creating. I love your books. The
Thank you.
fishing song, that's the first one I got in touch with, and then that really connected us. And then I just say, oh wow, this is a beautiful. The fishing song. And by the way, I sang that song when I was younger too. Yeah.
Yes. Nice.
I think we all do. There's a Chinese nursery song.
Yes.
Uh, and then you have a Lunar New Year, and
Yes.
I love the pictures. I'll let you talk about it.
Sure.
And then the recently you just released a build a plane,
Yes.
and then I thought we got to talk about all these three pictures and picture books, and then they are bilingual in
Yes.
English and Chinese, and
Mhm.
then it has the music element in there. Not just that, not just singing, not just with the music notes, like the regular things that usually people see. What I love is in the back, you actually have the notes and say, well, these are the colors and these are the things you can do. Why don't you try it yourself? So can you kind of share your experience and why you create these books and it's become an author? Yeah.
Sure. Thank you for asking. This is several years ago, back in 2021. I was working in a private practice with children who are on the spectrum, or some of them have specific needs. Maybe they're not on the spectrum, but they're legally blind, so they had to learn music, learn to read music and play music, with some adaptations, right? And so I was creating some of these color coded music scores to help with children as part of that practice. But that was kind of just I just prepare it for
Mhm.
the sessions as a plan. It wasn't books at the time. However, fast forward, I was working in the children's hospital, and this is children's hospital where kids are admitted maybe for a longer period of time. Maybe they are going through some disease, and so they're staying in the hospital for weeks at a time. And so one particular young patient who was only 4 year old at the time, she had cancer and she was in one of the most confined units of the hospital called BMT. So it's bone marrow transplant unit. They have to be very protective, no visitors, nowhere they cannot go out because they basically have to go through this whole treatment to wipe out their immunity in order to have the bone marrow transplant, right? And so this child's family, they all speak Mandarin. I never ask exactly which country they're from, but I assume maybe China based on the accent that I was aware of. But they don't speak English, so at the time it's very challenging, as you can imagine. Like the parents, dealing with this medical diagnosis of their only child, and they're living in the hospital. They cannot leave their room because of the infection protocols, infection control protocol, and so medical staff come in and out and there's translation services, but sometimes they just get to the point and social emotionally there may not be that much, right? And I'm not saying there's not, but it's hard enough, right, for any family that speak English, but on top of that there's a language barrier. So I was actually brought to work with this child, and long story short, she was experiencing what we call selective mutism. Like, she stopped talking, like she'll just make noises with her own parents and of course with other staff after a very traumatic experience from one of the procedures. And so our hope was to help her cope with this, and we believe that it's more of a psychological state than physical or cognitive, right? And so I, without too much background information, I came in to assess and try to get to know her, and I found out that the whole family only speaks Mandarin. So I'm trying to think, well, 4 year old, well, I don't know for sure what her home region might be, and I can be for sure that this nursery rhymes I know from Taiwan, she might know. I don't know for sure, but I can try. And so I pull out some of these like old nursery rhymes I had not sung for many years, and her eyes lit up. And she wasn't speaking at the time yet, but I could just tell that she was engaged, right? Because she was making eye contact with me, and she's very curious, like like what's going on? Like, out of, at a hospital, this lady brings in like these little percussion instruments and guitar was singing in a language she could understand. And so then fast forward, I began working with her regularly, like every week. And slowly, her personality came back alive and she was starting to respond, engaging in music, playing with the instruments, and she'll sing some words. So some words started to come back. And so I wanted to just keep working with her, but her mom also requested, like, we're in the hospital for so long, she's missing schoolwork, and I'm hoping she can do something that's intellectual, right? It's cognitive, like, development for her. Like, maybe we can introduce some more like Mandarin songs, but it's okay if it's English too, because like she needs to know some English too. And so I was preparing all these session plans of like both English and Mandarin, but also wanting to engage and connect with her. And she expressed to me that she wanted to learn the piano. And for me, I'm a pianist, right, to begin with. So it's easy for me to create materials. And I've taught in the past too. But for her, because hospital beds, this is very different from having access to a full piano. I had to bring in smaller keyboards. And it's just, you don't always have a set official time to have a dedicated time, because other staff might come in and out too, right? So it has to be modified. But long story short, I start creating these like color-coded music lesson, and not to make it rigorous because I wanted it to be fun and engaging for her, but I was also introducing these Mandarin and Chinese songs, and she loved it. And we just see her grow and see her like kind of thrive. And the good news is eventually she was able to be treated and leave the hospital. But for me at the time, I was pouring so much into the preparing and the planning. I tried to look up online, like, hey, are there like materials I can just buy and use rather than creating these materials? And at the time I couldn't find much on Amazon, at least in the US market. And so that includes both Mandarin, English, and also music. So I'm like, I think maybe I should just start writing and creating these books, because as a mom, I have 2 children as well, and I teach them Mandarin at home and Chinese and music. So I was like, I bet there's more people who would be
Who need
looking for
it?
something.
They need it. Yes.
Yeah, so that was sort of the start of the fishing song, which is this middle one,
Yeah.
and that was one of the first one. And at the time, I really wanted to make it into a series, so I, later got into Lunar New Year and built a plane. But that was sort of the original story that inspired it.
Right. I mean, it's just beautiful. I think this is the most interesting thing, as a mother, as a pianist, and also as a therapist. I think you really kind of pulled all different directions and then combine all the skills and talents together to make different books can benefit with a lot of people, especially when you talk about these books. Originally you were searching for something similar with music, with language, and not just one language but 2 languages.
Yes.
It's very similar in a different way, because I also have 2 kids, and then when I first started, all the songs I wrote are actually for my kids. I was like,
Yes.
oh well, they're here in the States, or at that time we were probably overseas, but still I just decided, well, how do we do something that's more interesting? And then because my daughter at that time she was in preschool, so there'll be more fun when all the little kids were singing with her. And you couldn't believe when you have like a 15, 20 kids that were all singing Chinese in a mainstream preschool. And then one day when a dad actually said, hey, hello, Miss Panda. And then he started singing a Chinese song. I taught his daughter. That
That's
was in the
awesome.
parking lot. That was just hilarious. That was really fun. And then so you start to see this is very contagious, right?
Yes.
And so the power of music, of singing, and then you talk about, not just doing the music, but have a curriculum, have all the background things you're doing. For example, you're trying to kind of have like a lesson plan. So parents and teachers, we know how much we will appreciate all the teachers created a lesson plans and let the kids have a lot of fun. So because in your books, you actually have like author's notes and you provide different things. And then this is your first book, The Fishing Song.
Yes.
Actually, we can see the notes and they are all color coded, right? These are all
Yes.
color coded. And then this is a series called Learning with Colors,
Yes.
right?
Learning sounds with
And
colors.
yeah, learning songs with colors. And then I'm just curious, in your book, you actually have a like a how do you call that? Like a color bar and then almost like a keyboard you can
Yes.
use. Can you share that and how do readers or parents can use that?
Yes. Here, do you want to pull out the page with the keyboard,
Yes,
and I'll pull out my xylophone. So
sure.
so there's a page in all of these
Here.
books. Yes, thank you. That
Yeah.
shows a keyboard and then the color dots, and feel free to put it down. I think maybe we
Hmm.
already, yeah,
No, I
whenever you.
do need people to see this.
Yeah, yeah, sounds good.
Okay.
Yes. And so
Okay, so here we go. Yeah,
so it
let's
can
see.
be sort of indicated, right? Because sometimes when the child looks at a piano, or maybe
Yeah.
a parent who may or may not have played the piano,
Hmm.
there's just so many keys. And to tell a child to memorize exactly the notes, it sometimes can be just too overwhelming, right?
Yes.
And so, and this can be applied also to something like a xylophone, like a toy or a early instrument, right? That's color coded. Or sometimes music teachers in classrooms use this thing called boom whackers. They're these like tubes that are plastic, but they're in different lengths. So when you bang on like a desk, it creates that tone, like the CDE, like the musical notes. And so there are some tools that are very accessible. A child like a 3-year-old or 4-year-old who may not have a formal piano lesson can at least see the color usually, right? And so the hope is that like, okay, the parent doesn't have to feel like, wow, I forgot my piano lessons from 30 years ago. How am I supposed to help this, how my kid? But no, actually, there's colors in the keyboard. And then when you turn a page to the score, you can find the notes on the keyboard or the xylophone or the boom whackers to find the notes and play the song right away. And so my hope was to really increase the access to music and also the song in both Mandarin and English
Right.
to any families and any children.
Right. And then I heard we are actually going to you have a surprise for our audience actually. You're going to sing live for us.
Sure.
Yeah, and I know your latest song, the latest book. Do you want to show I think that's right on the top of your
Yes.
shelf. It's
Yes.
yeah, would you like to talk about this book a little bit? Yeah.
Yes, yes. It's called Build a Plane, and this one is inspired by the folk music called 造飞机
Hmm.
in Chinese. And so for me, I call this series, I always say that they're reimagined and retold because I sort of use these children characters to kind of retell the story through the illustrations and the songs. The Chinese part is from the original folk song, but the English song sometimes I tweak a little bit. I write it the way how I wanted to tell the song, I guess, right? And so in this particular story, this is two sisters, or you can consider them as friends. I don't necessarily call them sisters in the book, but they're working together to build a plane. And so the theme of this book is it's about pursuing their dreams, working together to towards the dream. And you see that they're building a plane together, and they're able to fly the plane. And I kind of made this into a vertical spread.
That's beautiful.
Yes, thank you. And then we have the same, like, the color coded keyboard and the song. Some discussion points here. I always like to include some questions that the reader can digest and sort of think about. Like, for example, what is one thing you want to make or work towards this year? And, what do you dream of doing or becoming? Can you share some reasons? Stuff like that. So, and then, anybody can scan a QR code and listen to the recording of the song.
Right.
But that's sort of the gist of it.
Right. So this is so exciting. This is your latest release. And then also,
Yes.
would you like to show everybody the Lunar New Year one? Because that is
Yes.
very special because the
Yes.
pictures are actually, the images are actually based on a real place in Taiwan.
Yes. Lunar New Year is based on the song 恭喜恭喜.
Yeah.
And so I have this is about like the family traditions during the celebration of Lunar New Year, or also known as Chinese New Year. And the setting is taken at a place called Dihua
Oh,
in Taipei.
yeah, yeah.
Yes, you can kind of see the architecture. This is the
Mhm.
famous part, the red brick buildings, and even this the style of flooring. You can still see it today when you visit Dihuajie. And I think those were the main ones. These were, I think, turned into like interior in the house. But this one like is when there's Lantern Festival in Taiwan, which is at the end of Lunar New Year celebration
Hmm.
after 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Taipei has a really wonderful Lantern Festival that it just is very beautiful. I miss visiting it, but it's
Yes.
usually at the time I cannot go back to Taiwan. But this is
Hmm.
sort of hoping to paint that because sometimes they'll have small sections that allows kids to submit their art, their lanterns.
Yes.
And so this is sort of to mimic that. Like there's some kids section, this is kid painted lantern next to the bigger glowy exhibit.
Exactly. So this is almost like if you can also go to Pingxi and then have the sky lantern, let go the sky
Yes,
lanterns to make
yes,
your wishes come true. So a lot
yes,
of your books, actually every one of your books in this series actually all have something to do with the culture, the Chinese
yes.
culture, and you connected beautifully, like you said, with the English language to open up the world for the kids, even if they are not learning Mandarin Chinese, it's totally okay. But you let them to discover the beauty of another language.
Yes, yes, that was my
Yeah.
hope, bringing the world to the reader.
Yes, totally. And I think the other thing I want to talk about is so in your book, actually, you do have like how to use this book. Okay,
Yes,
and you how to use this book, and then you ask questions, like you said. And then in every book, you have a note. I remember this book when I read it, I thought this is a very touching. I believe this is for your daughters, Dorothy and Ada.
yes.
Right. So basically, the may you seek and overcome your impossible. I think it's every one of your book is giving a very positive thoughts to the kids, to
Yeah.
their readers, and I think that just echo beautifully with the work you do with children who are not well, or little babies, or even adults, or children there on the spectrum. So that is just beautiful. So, what song are you going to share with us today? I'm so excited.
Thank you. I thought I would share Build a Plane because it's the
Okay.
newest release. Let me grab
Hmm.
my guitar.
Sure.
Here's my guitar. I have to kind of go through my earphones cords. It's all good. All right. So I will sing it in both English and Chinese since it's pretty short song anyway. Does it sound okay?
Yes, you sound beautiful. Yes.
Alrighty. Build a plane on the field, come on, let's go. Spin around, propeller, hear the wind blow. Spread your wings, hit your turn, find a way to go. Lean forward, almost there, going not too slow. Take off now to the sky, see the clouds below. 造飞机，造飞机，来到青草地。蹲下来，蹲下来，我做推进器。蹲下去，蹲下去，你坐飞机翼。弯着腰，弯着腰，飞机坐得起。飞上去，飞上去，飞到白云里。Take off now to the sky, see the clouds below. Thank you, thank you.
So much fun. So much fun. What's the song in English and in Chinese? And it just flows so well. I think it's a great way to let the kids to connect with the languages and also with different cultures. And how do you explain it? How do you interpret it? That all kind of connect together.
Thank you,
And
thank you.
why? Well, I know, you are also raising bilingual children.
Yes.
And then, what's your experience on this journey? I think parents and educators probably are very curious to know because we know you are the only Chinese speaker in the family.
Correct, that's right. So I actually immigrated to the US when I was 14, right? So for much of my education was actually in the US, but I also spent enough time in Taiwan as a child to, have some foundation of Chinese. So I would say that it wasn't until I became a mom that, teaching my children and raising them as bilingual become this very real thing. I mean, up until that point, right? I knew I wanted to have children. I knew, yes, bilingualism is great, a good skill to have. But in execution, it felt like a very different thing because, first of all, I speak with my husband in English most of the time. He's learned more Mandarin over the years. But a lot of my parenting books that I read or the language that I use as a therapist as adults was actually in English. So I really had to shift my mindset to start speaking to my children in Mandarin from day to day, right? Like I, almost reverse that assimilation I had as a teenager, growing up in the U.S. And so I remember just like, wow, okay, how do I say that in Mandarin? Like, how do I even phrase this positive parenting? Whatever books I was reading, but I was reading in English, but I had to think about how to say it in Mandarin. And then, of course, my kids quickly learned that my husband and I speak English with each other too. And they're old enough to point out, oh, I know you can speak English, Mom. Like, can you say that in English? I'm like, no, I have to say this in Chinese, in Mandarin to you.
But the trick doesn't work anymore.
The trick to say I don't understand, English doesn't work anymore. They definitely know that. And so, but thankfully that my husband shows a lot of eagerness and curiosity to learn as well, to learn Mandarin. But it's not easy it's just we live in an environment that the primary language, I would say, right, is English. And they go to a public school where English is used. So anyway, so it's shifted and it's evolved over the years. But initially, it's conversational, right? And then I start teaching them to read at home. I've scouted the internet, the Facebook forums, which I'm sure, Amanda, you have done over the years as well too, right? And I used like 4、5块读, but a mom like translated that into traditional Chinese.
Yes.
So I use the traditional version. And I've done stage books as well. But and then they learn to read, but we read at home a lot. Like, so I've kind of curated like a library of Chinese books, and we just utilize the world of literature to kind of help have more variety and more interesting things to read. But I do make a commitment to take them to Taiwan, to have this immersion experience. And I know I'm very privileged and I'm very grateful for that opportunity. My husband and I, we agreed on how much they learn when they are in the environment that speaks Mandarin all day, all the time. And the first time we did this was back in 2022. Before that point, I had only gone back to Taiwan twice in 20 years.
Oh, wow.
We didn't go back very often. But then we took them back after the pandemic, and we just saw that in the short 2 weeks period, their Mandarin just jumped a whole level. Like, I think it's because you're walking down the street, you see the signs in Chinese, and then you go into a convenience store, you go to restaurants, everyone is speaking in Mandarin. It's very natural. It's just all day. You don't even have to sit them down to read, to memorize, the flashcards and the, characters. They're just hearing it, absorbing it all day long. And it was very, very, very efficient and effective. So after that trip, we just decided, what, we like traveling, but at this, year, like the formative years of, learning languages, let's just prioritize going to Taiwan. And that way we signed them up for like local camps. Like this past summer, for example, my daughter participated in an art camp where like she's learning to bake and she's learning to like, paint, but the teacher and the peer interactions all in Mandarin. She's come home with like recipe notes in Chinese, even though we didn't, expect it at all.
Is that beautiful? That's all the little effort, every little step actually counts for building up children's cultural awareness and also language ability. And then I agree, I feel very privileged as well. Over the years, even though a lot of times more than 10 years, we were not in the States, we were somewhere else in the world, but we, from time to time, were able to go to Taiwan as well. So your experience totally resonate with my own experience. My kids are much older now, and then they are in control of their bilingualism, or my daughter is actually trilingual. So what you said about going to the local camp is something very fascinating. I saw my daughter went to an insect camp with the local kids, and when I went to pick her up, she was not there. I was like, huh? Where's my daughter? And then the counselor came out and said, oh, she's still in the classroom and doing notes. I said, doing notes? And they said, we told her she can do it in English, but she said, no, I can do this in Chinese. That really is something very touched me, because I think she connects with the
Yes.
language, with the culture, with the
Yes.
friends there, and also with the big sisters and big brothers, in the camp.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and then later on, my kids also joined like a cooking class. Actually, it was a lot of fun for them, even though there are things I didn't cook, but they were like, "Oh, do you know this?" So it's really fun. So thank you for sharing that experience with us. I think the most important thing is you actually have one more book I didn't touch on, is a Here and Now. I think we need
Yes.
to touch on that as well.
Oh, thank you, thank you. So here now is right here. It's a book with a mom and a baby in the cover. This one is currently in English only, but I am working on making it into Chinese, Mandarin, and also maybe expanding to another language as well
Mhm.
too. In I think Spanish is what I'm thinking. This song was completely original. It wasn't derived from a folk song. It was inspired from my former work in the NICU when I was working so much with moms and babies, and it's celebrating the special bonding between mom and
Mhm.
baby, from as early as pregnancy. So, for example, I can share some interior part, like the first part of the book shows that little baby in pregnancy from the beginning, but it talks about I saw you like a star blinking so bright. Like, any mom who has gone through the ultrasound, you see that little blinking heartbeat, right, of your
Yeah.
baby. It goes through like, becomes more developed as a term baby. Did you hear the heartbeat or prayers of mine? Were they like marching drums or my life's rhythm in time?
Mhm.
As the story goes, it sort of celebrates every step of development of a child and that bonding between them. Um, so it's a song too. It's a little bit longer song than the other three books that I have, but this was sort of just something that I wanted to create. It was at the time a little different from my bilingual series, so I kind of just like, okay, you know what? It's just a song I wrote, but I really wanted to sort of tell that story through the illustrations, and it also does have the score in the back for anybody who is interested. But it's a longer song, right? So it's not so short and big for a little kid to play, but it is available as a resource.
Different
So
kind of purpose, different kind of story.
yes, yes,
Hmm. So we know that your company is music and tales. So everybody,
yes,
for the any day today or the holiday season or birthdays, any kind of celebration, if you want to give a gift, so, you can go to musicandtales.org for Isabelle's books. And then please let our audience and listeners know where they can connect with you and then follow you.
thank you, thank you. I'm pretty active on Instagram, so you can find me at music and tales in one word. And I think it's also the same handle for Facebook page as well. But I think Instagram has been my most active community because the reels and the stories seem to work really well with this channel.
Fabulous. Well, it's such a wonderful time, we had together have these conversations.
Yes,
Thank you for coming over and share your experiences as an author, as a music therapist, as a pianist, as a mother raising two wonderful bilingual children. And thank you so much for coming in, and then we hope to have you over again.
thank you. It's my honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Oh, by the way, if you want to know about our giveaway from Isabel, don't forget to follow
Yes,
MissPandaChinese.com, and then we will have a post up very soon, and then you can be a winner for her latest book and build a plan. Thank
yes,
you.
yes.
谢谢，谢谢 Isabel。
Thank you so much. 谢谢。